What we're trying to do is reduce government. We have too many people. The word tariff is my favorite word in the dictionary.
He's elected to get him the hell out of here, and the courts are holding me from doing it.
The golden age of America has only just begun.
President Trump accuses Iran and Israel of violating the shaky ceasefire between the two countries, just days after the United States bombed 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. And Trump made his displeasure with both countries clear this morning in comments that included a bomb of his own, an F-bomb, because he was so frustrated. Welcome to Sidebar from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey, along with, you already know it, Rhonda Colvin and James Hohmann. And joining us live from New York, it's JM Rieger. Hi, JM. Thanks for being with us. And while we're here in the middle of another huge week in news, when is it ever quiet, guys? We also have some news of our own. This episode, we're sorry to say, will be our very last episode of Sidebar. More on that coming up later in the show. And we promise we'll fill you in on where you can keep reading and seeing all of our content. But first, let's start where we always do with the breaking news. And today it's about Iran. And there are a lot of geopolitics as well as plain old-fashioned U.S. politics, Rhonda, embroiled in all of this. So President Trump announced last night this ceasefire, but then both sides began some attacks. And so as Trump was leaving the White House this morning, he stopped and did one of these gaggles where he talks to reporters. He's on his way to The Hague and a NATO summit. And you could tell that Trump was really ticked. First, he said the ceasefire is holding. Then he sort of admitted it might not be. And then he said this.
I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
And with that, the president of the United States walked off. Wow. So this, of course, is not something you usually hear from the president of the United States publicly. James, what do you read from Trump's comments?
He got the United States engaged in this conflict over the weekend, and I think he is very nervous about escalation. He ran on ending the endless wars in the Middle East. A lot of his political rise was criticizing the war in Iraq. I think he knows that despite the strikes, Iran still has a lot of ballistic missiles. Iran has the ability to close the Strait of Hormuz if it wants to, that oil prices could spike. Iran retaliated on Monday, but it was very measured and there was a heads up to the United States. And so I think Trump thinks, okay, let's just declare victory. Let's get out of this. And frankly, he can keep both sides of his coalition happy. This Republican coalition that he's built has internationalists and isolationists. And right now he can sort of please all of them and just take the win. You said something earlier that was just so on point, James. You said, you know, Trump made war and now he's trying to be the peacemaker. Very much. And that's, I mean, he likes some things about being a wartime president, but he also doesn't want his administration to be defined by another quagmire in Iran with a population twice as large as Iraq, a country that I think is 4 times the size of France, maybe 3 times, geographically massive. And he has sort of flirted with maybe he wants regime change. And then today saying squarely, we don't want regime change because I think he doesn't want this to basically swallow his presidency the way that, frankly, Iran swallowed Jimmy Carter's presidency after the revolution in 1979, the way Vietnam swallowed other presidencies, Iraq swallowed George W. Bush's presidency. Trump doesn't want that. And so he just wants to sort of stop it. He also, I think, has been very sensitive to coverage in recent days that he's been doing Bibi Netanyahu's bidding. There's a lot of reporting. It is true that Netanyahu decided he wanted to attack Iran last year and set about trying to persuade Trump. Trump sort of reluctantly went along after trying to talk him out of it. And so there's coverage even on right-wing media of like, oh, Trump's doing what Netanyahu wants. And so this is Trump's way of saying, no, I'm the senior partner here. I'm in charge. I'm not taking orders from the Israelis. Yeah, the coverage is clearly bothering him because in this gaggle this morning, he went on this real rant about CNN and MSNBC not admitting that, you know, true destruction had really happened in Iran. They're saying that they just obliterated these facilities and that we're still all trying to figure out exactly what happened at the facilities. We're relying on satellite images and things like that. So he's clearly irked about how some of this coverage is going. Rhonda, what did you hear in President Trump's words?
Yeah, I think his anger stood out to me. I mean, you do see that he seems a little bit more frustrated than maybe when he gave his speech right after the strike over the weekend. He was showing that he was confident that they made the right decision. He was flanked by, other people in the administration. But that did seem, what we just saw was a Trump who is probably thinking about the fact that this could go on longer than he can manage. And when you look at the history of, U.S. and Iran, this goes way back. This is not something that Trump can may be able to handle on his own. I mean, go back to the Reagan administration, Iran-Contra, like all of those things. He is now having to deal with an issue and a nation that his predecessors have had a tough time managing as well. So it does appear he's aware of that. And this also stood out to me, and this may seem like a simple way to define it, but Trump is very aware of his persona that he has built and run on as a deal maker. He's the author of The Art of the Deal. He told supporters that he could get the U.S. out of the war, any wars that had started during Biden's administration. And that has not happened. So I think he knows that a lot of his legacy, his persona is on the line. And in fact, his anger almost seemed like a personal affront had been done to him. He's that angry. And it also reminded me of a couple weeks ago. Remember when he wanted a peace document from Putin and Putin didn't deliver, and he started truth socialing and posting that something was wrong with Putin, and he would perhaps entertain the idea of sanctions, he told reporters. So this is not the first time we have seen Trump frustrated that a deal that he felt he had a handle on isn't coming to fruition.
And I wouldn't discount the fatigue element too. This is someone who's nearly 80 years old. This was early in the morning. He has been tweeting or truthing all through the night. He was truthing at 1:30 this morning about the ceasefire. We know he's been in the Situation Room a lot. We know that this has been, he's essentially gambled his presidency on being able to get in and out and not get pulled into a full land war in the Middle East. And now he's flying to a NATO summit. Trump famously doesn't sleep on planes. And he's clearly tired, and he's going to be on the plane all day. He has a dinner late tonight in The Hague, and then tomorrow he's going to have this summit where he has to listen to 31 other heads of state give 10-minute speeches, and then he's going to fly back late Wednesday night. And it feels like he becomes irritable when he becomes tired, and it feels like we might be in store for a couple more days of an irritable president.
JM, let's go to you in New York, the heart of where Donald Trump made his reputation as this deal maker. We're hearing some interesting things from Republicans and the MAGA base as they react to, like last week as this was building up and Israel was acting and the U.S. was trying to figure out where to go and what to do. And then after the strike on Saturday, what are you tracking and watching in terms of how the administration is communicating to its base and to the American public at large?
I think one of the central questions here among a few is, where does this go from here? I think what we saw with Trump's anger this morning was sort of a realization in the moment, or, a frustration in the moment, that he was potentially losing control of where this went, how embroiled the U.S. potentially becomes here, how limited the scope of these strikes are. And I think that then circles back to your question, Libby, which is the divide that we have seen among Trump's MAGA base over the last few days here. And as James mentioned, you have kind of a mixture of folks as part of that coalition. How that political base of his and how those kind of loyalists, especially in Congress, kind of react as this continues to play out seemingly over the next days and potentially weeks here, I think is a key question, because Trump has been operating throughout his whole presidency as if he has sort of an unlimited supply of political capital. And if this turns into a situation with Iran and Israel here, where the U.S. becomes further enmeshed in this entire dynamic, and there's a whole range of scenarios that James laid off the top there, that could really shift the political dynamics and the wins for him domestically. And I think that's one of the key things among the other factors that we're watching, paying attention to.
The message that we heard from all of his surrogates who were on the talk shows on Sunday was like, trust Donald Trump, trust the president, JM.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite remarkable, honestly. You had Secretary of State Marco Rubio, you had Vice President J.D. Vance, essentially saying, trust the president's gut here. Don't even worry necessarily about what the intelligence was and whether the intelligence was U.S. intelligence, Israeli intelligence, sources and methods. Don't worry as much about that. Trust the president, trust the president's instincts here. And when you have a president that's floating among kind of the low 40s in approval rating, which he's kind of consistently been at, give or take, it's quite a remarkable stance to take. I think that it reflects, on the one hand, their assumption, the administration's assumption, that this is going to be limited in scope and not necessarily bog the U.S. down long term, maybe similar to an Iraq situation. I also think it reflects they know that the base is with them, but it all does tie together, Libby, with the kind of fissures that we're seeing, the splitting that we're seeing in the MAGA base, and then how the administration is messaging here, because it's at times been at odds of this. Well, it was aimed at their nuclear program. It's aimed potentially at regime change. And then Trump walked that back a little bit after he sent that Truth Social post out. So how the administration continues to message here is kind of a central part of this. And the fact that they were on those Sunday shows over the weekend, essentially saying, don't worry about the intelligence. Don't worry about whether the intelligence has changed. Just trust us in this equation is really a very specific way, to put it generously, of going about this.
I'd love to be in the Signal chats right now on this because, okay, so on the Sunday shows and other places, like all these people like J.D. Vance go out and say, this is not about regime change. No, the U.S. is not at war with Iran. It's at war with Iran's nuclear program. I'm paraphrasing. And then Trump puts out a Truth Social that is like, maybe this regime change thing could, I mean, the Signal chat must have been like, no, boss, like walk it back. So it's erratic behavior, but I think some of Trump's allies say, well, this is part of his secret sauce, right? The fact that he is unpredictable, the fact that you can really tick him off and he could take action. That's part of the like trust the gut. Rhonda, what are you watching on the Hill for reaction to all this?
Well, one, thank you for asking, because I do have a point to make about the Hill and what JM was just laying out, that the intelligence is going to be very important in all of this. Right now, you see Republicans buying into that refrain about trust Trump. He's a man of his word. He'll get this thing done. But this is kind of late breaking. About an hour ago, the Senate and the House, they were alerted that they would not have their briefing today. We've all been watching and waiting for Congress to be briefed on the situation. It was planned for 3 and 4 o'clock today, and for some reason right now has been canceled. So what that reason is, I'm not sure. I am now reading emails from Democrats who are saying they are demanding answers from the White House as to why they pulled out of a very important classified briefing. So that also may show, that perhaps the intelligence isn't ready. Perhaps it's not ready to share with the wider Congress. I know there has also been on the Hill a lot of criticism that Trump did not alert the Gang of Eight. That is both leaders of both parties in both chambers, plus both parties' top member in the intelligence committees. So those 8 members all were not alerted on Saturday when this happened. The Republicans were, but the Democrats weren't. So I think
that is like to alert the Republicans and not the Democrats.
And the fact that you've now canceled a classified briefing that was scheduled for later today. When you think back, I've heard a lot of people talk about the weapons of mass destruction and Colin Powell's hearing that he had on that. He had documents, they had bad sourcing, but he had some sourcing. The fact that this right now isn't really being accompanied with intelligence sourcing that Congress members can see, that's interesting. That's something that I will be watching. To your initial question, something I'll be watching in the days and weeks ahead. Is there any intelligence that can put some members at ease that this was the right decision?
This is so much more important than political winners or losers, James. As we watch the bombing of like Tehran and we watch other strikes going into Israel, we are seeing casualties. We're seeing, even Evin Prison was hit. And that's, of course, where one of our colleagues was held. Jason Rezaian was held. There are political prisoners there. There are artists there. There are peacemakers there. There are people who fight against the regime. And it's not like a prison break. It's not like they just, shut open the door and let everybody run out. Like we're still watching to see what the casualty count was there. This is really affecting the citizens. But I do wonder, is Benjamin Netanyahu kind of getting what he wants in this moment? Because he has been itching to get at Iran for a long time.
It's really fascinating. So it's now a 12-day conflict. The Iranians say 974 people have died. The Israelis say 28 have died. And it is good to remember that side of it. But the key thing here is the nuclear program. And I think Netanyahu has sort of won the war. Israel won this war, and now there is some risk that Iran wins the peace, that Trump, in his desire to sort of get out of this and to stop things, they bombed these 3 nuclear sites with the B-2 bombers. They came back to Missouri. Trump says it's over now, but we don't know the full extent of the damage. We also don't know the extent to which Iran moved 400 kilos of highly enriched uranium. That stockpile is missing. Now, our colleague John Hudson had some reporting today that the reason the ceasefire came about is because the Iranians told the Americans through the Qataris, we will negotiate with you about our nuclear program and the material if you get Israel to stop bombing us. So it's possible that there now is an opening for diplomacy. But the question now is sort of how long does this delay a bomb program if they want to do it? And what impact does this have on their ambitions? One way you could read it is they want to move it deeper underground and rush something in a clandestine way so that they have a deterrent so that Israel and the Americans can't keep bombing them. But maybe this does bring them to the table, but maybe they keep something hidden away. The Iranian government is also very fragmented and there are competing factions and forces. So I think
because also a lot of their leaders were taken out.
Exactly.
So not the Ayatollah, but like a lot of other leaders.
And like a lot of their high command, mid-level command, key figures, dozens of nuclear scientists. And so Israel has definitely delayed Iran's ability to get a bomb if it decides it wants the bomb, but we don't know how long or how much. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's irreparable, that Iran couldn't reconstitute its program, especially if it has this highly enriched uranium. And so the risk now for Israel is that they've kicked this hornet's nest and they didn't achieve. Netanyahu's objective is clearly regime change, even if that's not the U.S. objective. And now Iran's proxies are all weakened, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and their command and control is devastated. They're on their back foot. They're almost out of ballistic missiles. And that this ceasefire, in theory, could give Iran time to sort of recuperate, rejuvenate. And I think that scares the Israelis. And it's one of the reasons why the Israelis were so eager to like rush a bunch of planes out to do one last round of bombing. And
ceasefire. What ceasefire? Right.
Ceasefire, because I don't think this is
right.
This
he's watching.
Netanyahu didn't feel like
he hasn't achieved.
Yet.
Yeah,
Exactly.
he hasn't fully achieved what he wants to accomplish. JM, what are you watching as you look at this through like a political lens?
Yeah, I think not only, what does this do to the administration? I mean, how embroiled does the U.S., how enmeshed does the U.S. become in this? Where does this go from here? And then I think, back to Rhonda's kind of line of reporting here on the intelligence on Capitol Hill, not only are we seeing these fissures among the MAGA movement and Trump's base here, but on top of that, we still don't have actually great clarification of why now and why this specific route and kind of plan of attack, if you will, from the Trump administration. They've been a little all over the place in terms of, and a little vague, frankly, in terms of how they've talked about this. How much more clarity do we get in the days, weeks, maybe even months ahead here, not only on what was the impetus for this strike, but also what was the actual damage, which our reporting overnight was that the U.S. is still trying to figure that out. And that could take days or weeks potentially for the U.S. to have a good sense of where the Iranian nuclear program is at this point.
Rhonda, as Trump goes to this NATO summit, if he's got this successful ceasefire, he shows up as kind of a winner, right? But we're watching to see if it holds. How much does his winner or loser status matter on the world stage right now? How important is that to him achieving what he wants to achieve?
I think one of the things to watch out of this NATO summit is to see the reception he gets from the other world leaders. If you remember last year, we were covering when the NATO summit was here in D.C. I remember we were talking about that a lot. I remember on the Hill, there were people who were saying some of the leaders from NATO are very nervous that the U.S. will elect Trump again, because remember, he said he might consider pulling out of NATO when he was a candidate. So I think seeing the reception he gets from other world leaders is important to watch, because that also shows you probably his standing and buy-in on his decision-making in this, because the world is watching. And if Trump is there and has done something before there was good intelligence or that he has a good handle on, that is not going to put him in a great position with other world leaders as well. They're still going to have some uncertainty around him and his presidency.
I mean, there wasn't international buy-in on this action. To James' point about like why now, when, and everything.
Friedrich Merz, the German leader, made an interesting comment last week where he said Israel is doing the dirty work that we all sort of want them to do, but no one wants to say we want them to do it. You do have Emmanuel Macron, the French president, out there saying what Trump did was illegal. But I think kind of it really depends on the outcome, right? If Trump did successfully end Iran's nuclear ambitions, something that 5 presidents have tried to do, then I think everyone will be sort of happy. I mean, the Europeans are in a mood right now at the leadership level to keep Trump happy. And one of the things that
because of Ukraine or larger issues,
because they don't want him to take
tariffs
the side of Russia.
Are also
tariffs. I've heard that the European Union is actually very close to announcing a trade deal with the Trump administration. I mean, one of the things Trump did that he truthed on his way to the summit is he literally posted a text message that he received from Mark Rutte, the former prime minister of the Netherlands, who's now the Secretary General of NATO. And it was a private text to Trump, and NATO's confirmed its authenticity to us. But Rutte was like, you're coming in after your big win with Iran. And now, it's stroking his ego. But it's like in this text message.
I didn't realize it was a private text he'd sent.
And now and then he says, now you're going to come to NATO and you're going to get a victory lap because we've gotten every country in NATO, all 32 members, to commit to spend 5% of their gross domestic product on defense. And this is only possible because of your leadership. And it's all kind of gung ho. And Trump just tweeted it out. But it's interesting because we have an editorial in the newspaper today about how there was a lot of maneuvering behind the scenes. They've done a lot of gamesmanship. They want Trump to be happy. And so Spain threw a wrench in the final days and said, we're not going to commit to do this. And they basically said, okay, fine, you're exempt. And then in order to make it sort of work, they've said, well, you have to spend 3.5% of your GDP on actual defense. Then 1.5% can be on defense adjacent things like infrastructure. But the point is that Trump's going to get to say, look what I got Europe to agree to. Whether they actually follow through or not is a different story.
Well, the story goes on. Stay with us. When we come back, we'll reflect on our run with Sidebar. We've been on the air since April of 2024. And during that time, we realized this has really been a story of like the revitalization. What other words can you guys use? The
political comeback, the greatest comeback ever.
Of Donald Trump, because we started out covering his trials. So stay with us. Reflections on the past year and a half. You're listening to Sidebar from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey here with James Hohmann, Rhonda Colvin, and JM Rieger in New York. So it's our sad news to share. The show is ending. This is our last ever episode of Sidebar. It's been such a great run. It's been so much fun talking with you guys, talking with other colleagues in the newsroom, and also getting just messages from our audience about being engaged in politics in this moment. It feels like just yesterday that, Rhonda, you were outside that courthouse in Manhattan, and JM, you were outside that courthouse in Georgia covering the Trump trials. JM, square it in your mind. Pretend that JM Rieger, I don't know. I don't want to say went into a coma because that would be too sad. But JM Rieger just took a vacation for, 15 months or 16 months and came back into this world, suddenly plopped back down. And we're like, yeah, Trump's president again. Surprise. And the trials, most of them never happened. What do you make of it?
I think it's a really remarkable stretch of time, right? About, 14, 16 months, give or take there. And this show has really covered that whole time frame, which is really the political resurrection of Donald Trump. His career and his nomination, especially when you were in the middle of 2023, seemed a far-fetched kind of solution there for the Republican Party to run a winning candidate in 2024. And then we have Trump being convicted, indicted 4 different times, 2 assassination attempts, swapping out a presidential candidate mid-cycle, Joe Biden for Kamala Harris. Really one of the most remarkable election stretches, political stretches in modern U.S. history. And this show was there for all of it. And I think it spanned throughout the country, Libby, as you point out, and it was really a remarkable stretch of time. And also, how lucky are we to have had a front row seat to this moment in American political history, because Trump has really ushered in Trump 2.0 has ushered in an entirely new era here in American politics.
Yeah, James?
Trump's like the honey badger of American politics. He just doesn't care. He keeps going and going. Maybe he's the Energizer Bunny. It really is remarkable. His ability to weather every storm. He's Teflon Don. Everything sort of rubs off on him. Obviously polarizing. Half the country loves him, half the country hates him. But he just keeps going. And I mean, we've gone through so much, the trial, the shooting. And I mean, he did show his mettle there in a way very, very few humans would do if they were shot at, a bullet hit his ear, and his impulse was to say, fight, fight, fight. I think that earned him a lot of respect from a lot of Americans. And it really gave Trump supporters this feeling that he had something special, that he was here and had a purpose. And the election ended up, Trump won all 7 of the swing states. He became the first Republican to win the popular vote since George W. Bush in 2004. And I think Trump's resiliency really impressed a lot of voters. But I think we've also seen that, we're a center-right country. And a lot of what Trump has done on immigration, polls have shown a lot of people support it. With the Republican convention last year in Milwaukee, they were waving signs that said mass deportations now. And it shows how much the Republican Party has changed, but it's Trump's party now. And I reflect on, when we're talking about the trial, 2 things. The first is, Todd Blanche was one of Trump's lawyers. He's now the Deputy Attorney General. And Emil Bove was one of Trump's lawyers. He is being put up for a federal judgeship. His confirmation hearing is coming up. There's a New York Times story today about how in private meetings they were musing about disregarding court orders, and the Todd Blanche angrily denied it. But Trump's lawyers are now the nation's lawyers. They're in the top jobs. Pam Bondi was one of his lawyers during impeachment. Meanwhile. Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, the other thing, it was really striking at 10 o'clock on Saturday night, Trump is addressing the country after he's done these Iran strikes, and standing behind him are Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, J.D. Vance, the Vice President, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. All 3 of those men were never Trumpers in 2016. Marco Rubio ran against Trump. Pete Hegseth was blistering in his criticism on Fox. J.D. Vance called him America's Hitler. And Trump has so consolidated control over the Republican Party. Those are his guys. And today, putting kind of the cherry on top of just this full circle thing, Trump retweeted Jeb Bush, his nemesis, the frontrunner in 2015 and 2016, Jeb Bush praising Trump for his Iran strikes. And so that, I think, you talk to JM Rip Van Winkle, whatever you want to,
JM had been in that desert island this whole time. Yeah. I don't know what your mind would be more blown by.
Right.
Really,
but the idea that all those guys that Trump's top advisors are these 3 guys who said he was this horrible person who was not a conservative. And now they're lockstep behind him. And it's, Trump, we are living in the Trump era. Even Trump's presidency is going to end. J.D. Vance may or may not become the Republican standard bearer and then the president. But we're going to be living in the Trump era, just like the age of Jackson and the age of FDR.
I did not realize that until you said that on one of our broadcasts right after Trump was reelected, because I was thinking it was the Obama, 8 years of President Obama, and then Joe Biden had this, huge arc of a career, Rhonda, for so many decades, so influential. And then James said it, and it was like the mic drop. It was like we are in this Trump era.
For sure. I think when we look back at our own careers in covering this last year, we covered so much history that may have been designed by the Trump campaign, and they were able to campaign off of his hush money trial. They were able to do fundraising around his mugshot in Atlanta.
It's like they take the things that would destroy other politicians, right, and they use it
to their advantage. So I do think it is a new era in politics that political scientists, historians, future journalists will be examining, and we are living that out right now as it plays out. But one thing that when James was talking about the shooting, of course, the shooting coming after 4 court cases where only one really went through, I really think a lot of that helped Trump become or people to perceive him as someone who has invincibility. And I think that that actually assisted his relationship with other Republicans, like the Republicans you just named, who were never Trumpers and now standing behind him. I just go back to when, covering the Hill in his first administration, there were so many Republicans who would not want to go on record supporting things that Trump said. You always sense there was uncertainty about him as their candidate the next time around. But there was a lot of buy-in right after the shooting. And we were at the RNC watching, the aftermath of the shooting play out. And his Republican surrogates and those surrounding him seemed to buy into this idea that he's invincible. So let's just go with it. And I think that has helped him.
Let's lean into it.
Right. And I think we even see it now. I remember reading earlier this week when Mike Johnson gave his formal statement on the attack on Iran, the strike on Iran. The first sentence said something like, Trump is a man of his word and we need to trust him. And it goes along with this refrain we've seen over the last year that no matter what seems to work out for him, so let's just go with it. And I really think, even though that sounds very simplistic, that's at the core of a lot of Republicanism right now, that they'll, handle the problems when they come, but right now just go with it.
JM, that circles us back to the present moment, because Trump has two huge things on the line right now. One, of course, is what's happening in Iran and the Middle East writ large. The other is his one big, beautiful bill, which is in the Senate. They still hope to pass it by July 4th, which is 1 week away. I guess, what are you going to be watching for in terms of Republicans, not just on Capitol Hill, who seem quite bought in, but Republicans around the country, and maybe more importantly, independents' interest in sticking with Trump?
Trump came into office the second term and it has really been operating with this idea that he has kind of unlimited political capital and kind of goodwill from the American people. And I'm just going to go back to something that we discussed, the four of us discussed when Trump gave his joint address to Congress, and we got through that address and we were reflecting on it. And one of the things that came up was this question of what has Trump learned from Trump 1.0, from his first term, and how is he applying that to his second term? And when it comes to the legislative front, Trump broadly failed to get a lot of things through in his first term, other than tax cuts and a couple other smaller pieces. He's now doing that on steroids here with this beautiful bill, as they call it. And while the momentum, it does seem to be there that ultimately Republicans want to pass something in some form here, and what form that takes, obviously, we're waiting to see. He seems to have picked up some things, but that is going to be the crux here, because again, the House is one of the smallest majorities they've had in the last 100 years here, and what that means, we're only 15 months away from the midterms, give or take, 16 months away. So that the House could easily flip in the midterms here, and then Trump's sort of legislative agenda kind of hits the brakes, if you will. So there's a lot of open questions here. Trump knows that this is kind of the moment to get stuff done. This is when his political capital is going to be top. And the last thing I'll say is that Trump did come into office and he telegraphed this on the campaign trail, that he wanted to expand power as president, and he wanted to kind of push the limits of that presidential authority. We've seen that time and time again. We've seen it really for front and center with the immigration stuff, but we've also seen it even on these strikes in Iran. It's become almost routine for presidents to cite Article 2 authority to do military strikes throughout the world, and we've seen that now for a few decades now. Trump, I imagine, is going to continue on that path. That's all that he's telegraphed at this point. But I think that is going to be a central question of his presidency, and how effective he is, and how at least he's able to portray what he's doing as broad, quick actions.
I would say, and you guys have heard me say it before, that sometimes these things aren't really all that surprising. Because if you look at the comeback of Trump, I don't even know if it was a comeback or a resurrection. It was just napping, actually. I think it was a dormant Trumpism that was happening during the Biden years. I don't think Biden had a conventional presidency because he had a person in the background who still was leading a movement. And I remember all throughout 2023, up until Election Day in the following November, if you looked at the polling, Trump was always at the same polling level of half of America wanted him as president, the other half wanted Biden. And then when Harris came on the scene, same thing. The polling never changed. And I think that was the biggest signal that it may not have been a resurrection. I think he was always there. He was always a candidate that was going to be hard to beat. He has built a movement. And again, this is a part of the Trump era that James was talking about. He has built a movement that I don't think other modern politicians know what to do with and are still trying to figure out what to do with. But the writing was a bit on the wall for a lot of us when we looked at the polling and knew no matter what, it was court cases. And think of all the salacious things that came out of the hush money testimonies. Even then, he was still polling at the same levels. And that should have spoke volumes to a lot of people who thought, oh, he can't come back from this.
Couldn't agree more with that. But I also think back to January 6th.
Yeah. And January 7th.
We were so worried about your safety. You were literally running for your life. Libby and I were here trying to make sense of what was happening in the fog of chaos on Capitol Hill.
Terrified that you were going to be hurt and that other colleagues and friends and lawmakers would be injured.
Yeah,
It was one of the worst days ever. And it would have been unimaginable that day. Yep. And even in the weeks after, when 10 Republicans in the House and 7 Republican senators voted to impeach and convict Trump, that Mitch McConnell didn't feel like he needed to convict Trump because he didn't think he would win again. And you're right, the writing has been on the wall. The Trump movement continued to exist. People have sort of pretty quickly came to terms. In fact, just weeks after that, Kevin McCarthy, then the Republican leader in the House, flew down to Mar-a-Lago for a photo op that really began the political rehabilitation of Donald Trump. But I think of this arc, and there's so many things too. I mean, even 3 years ago today, was the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs overturning Roe v. Wade. And we saw that unleash
the movement.
a whole movement of people and taking literally to the streets here in Washington. And, Trump managed
that's not gone, but that's not gone.
But Trump managed to wiggle his way.
Trump, winning the swing states. Mm-hmm. It was not like a tsunami of a victory. And sometimes I think it's couched that way, or when people hear the pundits or even reporters talk about it, because we talk about the 7 states, it's like it was not a tsunami of a victory.
And he changed his position on abortion. I mean, he in order to,
talk about it.
And that's part of Trump's political skill or whatever. Yeah. Capability is that he did win narrowly, and he won in part by saying he wasn't going to do anything federal and really going out of his way. It was very much the dog that caught up with the truck, but he was able to pull that off in a way very few other politicians in our lifetime are dexterous enough to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, one more segment before we go. Our producers have put together a short highlight reel of our time on Sidebar. So we haven't actually seen this yet, so we'll watch it with you. Stay tuned here. For our last hurrah here at Sidebar, Rhonda has generously given us some Martinelli's, which is sparkling cider, non-alcoholic.
We still have work to do today.
We really do. Well, cheers, Rhonda. Cheers, James. And cheers to you, JM, and everybody else in the control room. It's been a good run.
Control room.
So, JM, apparently the producers here have a bit of a highlight reel for us all to watch and enjoy together. We haven't seen this yet, so let's roll the tape.
What do you do for a living?
What is your answer to that?
What do I do for a living? Yeah. Vodcast co-host.
Congratulations.
Thank you. As of today.
Welcome to the Trump Trials Sidebar, a new podcast from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey, and I'm here today with Rhonda Colvin and James Hohmann. Rhonda Colvin and James Hohmann, my partners for this entire week of coverage. And we'll be here each week talking about former President Donald Trump's legal fights. Joining us from Atlanta is Rhonda Colvin. She was at the site of the first and perhaps only debate of the general election cycle. 12 New Yorkers, 7 men and 5 women found Donald Trump guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records. We are broadcasting to you from the United Center in Chicago. The Democratic National Convention has just wrapped up. This just in that J.D. Vance is Donald Trump's pick to be his running mate. This time, JM, really does feel like, forgive the cliche, the calm before the storm, because President Trump prides himself on being a fighter. But what happens when institutions fight back. It all comes down to Michael Cohen and the cross-examination by Donald Trump's lawyers, which is happening as we record right now. The Supreme Court will hand down its decision on Trump's presidential immunity appeal, which could really redefine presidential power as we know it. That's the massive spending and immigration bill that Trump and his allies called the big, beautiful bill.
I personally would have reported it to our security team here at the Washington Post, who investigate email scams.
He's phishing me.
And
And there's so much on the line in this bill, politically, as well as in terms of what American laws and life look like for the next decade plus.
Democrats are in disarray.
So Republicans are considering cuts to Medicaid that could affect millions. They're also looking at changes to the Affordable Care Act. White smoke over the Vatican, a new Pope, Leo XIV, and it's an American for the first time ever. You know, Dan, Hegseth has been like the most microscoped member of Trump's cabinet, really. And my friends, should we ever have to part ways, let us not berate each other on Twitter. Are you guys rolling right now? Can I ask a question? Are you guys rolling?
It is recording.
Okay, good.
The shot is not totally reset, so it's not entirely in.
Okay, let's get Blair in it. Lean in, Blair.
Oh God. Are we like?
No, we're just hanging.
Okay.
I was like, they're getting things set up. Yeah, you can put your like
The camera's
put Cash Blair back on. Props to our director and colleague Billy for supplying us all with Diet Mountain Dew, gents. When was the last time you had a Mountain Dew, JM?
I've probably had one within like the last couple years.
One of the stranger parts about Michael Cohen's testimony is he uses the language of therapy to describe crimes.
I'm for annual Olympics at this point. Like if we had them every summer, the world comes together.
James and I like rush to the studio to get ready in case the jury comes back with a verdict. Rhonda fires up all of her cameras with her crew there. How many miles are you racking up right now?
I'm not really keeping track other than credit card points.
Like I said, you know, New Yorkers, and I'm saying this as someone who has lived in Manhattan, you have places to go, people to see, you're on the move.
We feel like we're in a giant-sized popcorn popper.
I was looking through it last night in its current standing, and it is over 1,000.
Picturing it printed out in your
Yes,
in
I didn't
your
even
place.
try to print it out.
pages.
Yes, it is about 1,100 pages.
Back
Seriously,
pain.
I don't know too many journalists who signed up for to work in this field and thought that they would have to cover this.
Right, I didn't think I'd ever say the word sitting in the slammer while campaigning for president.
If you got in this group chat like Jeffrey Goldberg did, would you have believed it?
Jury selection is like Curb Your Enthusiasm, but without cursing. Because people just come in and they say whatever's on their mind, and the conversations go in ridiculous directions.
I just accidentally drank some of this Diet Mountain Dew, and I have to say, it is so gross.
It really is.
And I love Mountain Dew. How much sleep did you guys get last night after our debate coverage?
Not a wink.
None?
None.
What about you, JM?
I got 5.
I mean, were you just stressed, James?
Well, it reminds me of Bob Dole after he lost the 1996 election. He said, "I slept like a baby. I woke up every hour crying."
I never thought Beyonce would come. Never. I didn't want to say it out loud because the whole arena has been buzzing all week about when's she getting here.
Save her for October.
Yeah, there you go.
I do enjoy cheese.
I like a good salty snack.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, I have a lot of them in Chicago.
I know.
I was going to say there's no shortage, right?
Okay, as fascinating as this cheese.
Okay. Whenever, are you going to roll the open or you just want?
We will be back with you next Thursday. So much yet to cover. I'm grateful to be doing it with the two of you. Thanks to all of our team. That's it for the Trump trials sidebar.
All right, that's all we have time for this week.
It's been such a week and it's only Tuesday, but luckily we have another episode of Sidebar coming up in just 2 days, so we'll catch you up on everything else that happens in the next 48 hours. James Hohmann, Rhonda Colvin, I'm Libby Casey. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you in a couple days. Aw, thank you, studio crew. That was so
lovely, guys.
So many memories.
Memories, yeah. So many stories.
So many hairstyles and so many sleepless nights. Cheers to you guys.
Yeah, cheers again, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
it's been a
JM.
great
We send you a cheers as well. Thank you, my friend. You know, it has been a journey, but it's also been a journey for me and Rhonda and James, because we've actually gotten to host live shows and content like this at the Washington Post for 6 years now together. And we want to say a huge thank you to our studio crew. Studio crews do so much to make this all happen, and they are often underappreciated and underacknowledged. So thank you. I have some shout outs. Peter Stevenson, our show's executive producer. Hyo Jung Kim, our producer Billy Tucker designed the studio, which is why I wanted you to go wide. Look how beautiful this studio is. And he directs and edits our show along with Peter and Ross Godwin. The operations team of Daniel Mitch, Justin Scaletti, Randy Smith, and David Bruns is the best in the broadcasting business. They are calm under any circumstance and a true delight to work with. The Washington Post is so lucky to have you guys. Our graphics team is led by Osman Malik, who we all call Oz because he is the wizard, and his crew, Darren Taylor, Sarah Hashemi, Brian Monroe, and CJ Rakulin. Also a thanks to Zach Purser-Brown, who oversees this broadcast, motivates our team, and keeps us rowing in the same direction. And a huge thanks to Lauren Sachs, who is our North Star and guide, and to Micah Gelman, who made this all possible. And finally, Rhonda and James, it's been such a privilege to sit next to you, learn from you, and learn with you. We've been through a lot together, from the insurrection at the Capitol to just the daily news beat. And I'm so grateful to have you guys as partners. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
If I've learned one thing, it's always listen to Rhonda, and James has the best laugh. Those are my two takeaways.
That is true.
Rhonda has the wisdom, I have the laugh.
Like I said, I knew Beyonce would not be.
I mean, you always do end up knowing.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Can we do some final thoughts?
You know, I love final thoughts, so let's do our final thoughts.
Yeah.
Rhonda?
Yeah, that is a mainstay in our shows is final thoughts.
Yeah.
My heart's really full being on this show and watching that reel. That's only a snippet of what we've done. Even though that snippet we could probably retire on. I mean, how much sleep did we get last year doing all the coverage, trying to inform people of what we see and what we're experiencing so that they can understand news as it's happening. I would really like to thank the people who have watched us over the years. Like you said, this show is sort of an evolution of our live shows that we did all the time. And I know I have heard back from viewers who have really enjoyed that we're able to break things down. We're not trying to spin it. We're just giving you some insight that we're able to experience and to just make sure everybody has the knowledge that they need. And thank you for listing that whole list of our department because it does take so many people. So I second that, all of that you said. But you guys have been great coworkers to work with. And I think we will, we'll be working together or alongside each other in other capacities. But it's been a really wild ride. And I'm glad I was a part of being able to report on history and try to inform people in the best way I could.
Thank you.
Final
thoughts, James?
This is, I think, our 87th episode of this, but really this has been a 6-year partnership, being kind of an on-air trio. Rhonda often out on the hill or in the
or in inclement weather.
Inclement weather.
Always in inclement snow.
Extreme heat, extreme cold. I mean, I think you mentioned history, and we really have together narrated so much history. I mean, there's the old proverb, may you live in interesting times, and these have been interesting times. And, I think back to, there's so many things we've done that are easy to forget. We really were doing a lot during COVID when we all had to be separated, and we were also scared, and we were trying to learn what was going on and communicate about what was going on. The Derek Chauvin trial, which was during COVID, where there was this national reckoning, and it really felt like we were there, multiple conventions over multiple cycles, so many election nights, so many congressional hearings. We just have narrated it together. We were in London for a funeral and a coronation. So I'm going to miss our, being live and narrating everything over this. But I guess the news business changes and the strategy changes, and but you'll always be my friends.
I can't believe how joyful you both are and calm you both are. And in the newspaper business, there's some calm people, but in the broadcast business, folks, it's a lot of personality. And you two and our entire crew are just such steady paddlers. And it's been such a delight to spend time with you both. So thank you. That wraps Sidebar and our live shows here at the Washington Post. Thank you, everyone. I'm Libby Casey. We'll talk to you again soon.
Now we can pull out the whiskey.
Here, can we take a selfie? A little thingamabobber here.
The real stuff, yeah. Libby, you want the last drop?
Sure.
It really is just a drop. I'm so sorry.
That's all. I only like drops. What are we gonna do next, guys?
Today or in the future?
Lives. Okay, ready? Hold on.
Let me get the.
Awesome.
Oh, lovely. We really have done a lot, guys. You should, if you have some downtime, look at all the old shows. Like, I don't know what sustained us, honestly. Like, it was back to back for several years.
And we were doing like a whole network's worth of stuff.
No commercials.
Right.
12 hours.
Yeah.
6 hours, 8 hours in the Capitol, 7 hours outside a courthouse. Yep. Well,
funerals.
I know.
Did our fair share.
I was gonna say weddings and funerals, and I was like, we never really got a wedding.
Did we not?
Maybe we didn't do the royal wedding.
Yeah, we did.